It's spooky month. Oh, sorry, let me try that again. It's spooky month. There, I think I've set the tone a bit now. It's spooky month, and that means get those scream masks out and get ready to play Silent Hill 2 Remake, which just came out earlier this month. Which, I know I'm playing it, and I'm loving it. Silent Hill is back. Now, while I am super stoked about Silent Hill's return, doing a video on that would be predictable and just throwing another song of praise into oversaturated realm that is YouTube. Besides, that's not what we do on this channel. I like to cover things that you may or may not hear a lot about, and that I find interesting. And that usually means digging deep into the obscure game market or covering games long forgotten about, sometimes for good reason. So in the spirit of that, and while keeping in the theme of Halloween, I figured I'd dig deep into the PlayStation 3 archives and pull out a game that many of you might not have even known existed. We are talking about Saw on the PS3. I'm sure some of you are scratching your heads and surprised that they made a Saw video game. Well, it might surprise you that they actually made 2 of them, and they weren't insanely popular, as it took me a bit to even get a copy of this game. I had to pay about $42 for a used copy, and the second game is even more expensive, selling for well over $100. So if I ever do a video on that one, it'll be when I can find it for a reasonable price, though I hear the reception of the sequel is far lower. What better game to do on Halloween, though, than a game that's based on a movie franchise that is released on a Halloween weekend for nearly a decade and is one of my favorite franchises. Now, don't worry though, this isn't going to be another Final Fantasy 13 or Duke Nukem Forever situation. Roll the clip. No, I'm just kidding, we're not doing that again. No, actually, this game is actually not that bad, and I think people have been a bit too harsh on it. And I'll preface this video by saying I actually enjoyed this game, though I will get into its flaws. Overall, as far as movie tie-in games go, this one actually is one of the better ones, and that's saying something because I have not only played, but owned the Catwoman game on the GameCube. You know, the one based on the Halle Berry film. I actually asked for it for my birthday and finished it back in the day, and yeah. So I'm no stranger to bad movie tie-in games, so take that for what it's worth. That's not to say this is a great game, because, well, it's not. Let's put it like this. If Catwoman is the Battleborn of movie tie-in games, Saw is more like the Bulletstorm of them. Not bad, not great, but pretty decent if not overlooked. This game came out on the Xbox 360, PS3, and PC back in 2009, and it was actually published by Konami. Crazy, right? I guess old Konami was trying to diversify their horror portfolio when Silent Hill was falling on hard times. It was built in the Unreal 3 engine. The game is developed by a smaller studio called Zombie Studios, who, oddly enough, used to actually make games for the US Army as basically a recruitment advertisement. Other than that, they have a large catalog of military games, usually based on various historical wars. So needless to say, despite their studio name, they don't actually have much experience in the horror genre, which is ironic. Eventually, they would go defunct in 2015, though. Right out of the gate, it's probably best to get this out of the way. This game has not aged well as far as graphics and design goes. It's ugly, and the character models look like something out of a Liminal Nightmare or a Courage the Cowardly Dog episode.
You're not perfect.
This becomes more apparent during any scene where we get a close-up look at the models, especially when they're talking, which is uncanny to say the least. Now, I know this is supposed to be a horror game, but the horror isn't supposed to come from the models that look like they had the bare minimum amount of effort put into them. The reality is, the graphics are perhaps the weakest aspect of this game, and sure, you could argue it's 2009, but Final Fantasy 13 came out in 2009 and it looked infinitely better. Hell, Doom 3 came out in 2004, and I feel even that's aged better graphic-wise, but let's not talk about bad Doom reboots in this video. I think because back then 1080p TVs were relatively uncommon and most of us were playing on 720p or in worst case scenarios if you were a literal caveman composite video, we might not have even noticed some of the bad textures, but when you plug your PS3 into any modern television such as my 4K Sony Bravia, you get to enjoy all the blocky textures in their absolute splendor. It's a real shame because it does take away from the immersion quite a bit when you first see it. As far as level design goes, though, I'm glad to say that the levels do match the theme of this game quite well, if not a bit cliched. You're locked in the same asylum, which is perhaps the most overused horror setting in history, but it's a tried and true setting, and I won't knock it. It worked for Outlast, which is a fantastic game. The choice of lighting, areas, all of it, it works well to make you feel like you're in a Saw movie, so I'd say unlike Catwoman, this game does a great job at making you feel like you're part of the film universe. It really does feel like you're playing one of the movies, and it's not an easy thing to do, even in modern games, which tend to just accomplish this by making a game into a walking simulator with little actual gameplay. What is a real shame is that it's clear the game's budget was a lot smaller than other major horror titles of the time, and it shows. The traps do feel a bit toned down from the movies, and we don't see anything nearly as gory or elaborate as Jigsaw is known for, but it's likely because they would simply be too difficult to make without a larger budget. It's a shame because I would have loved to see more traps from the films make an appearance. It's the old, could I make it out of that, you get when you're watching the movies, and it's a shame that it's not here. Now, don't get me wrong, a few of the iconic traps such as the death mask, the reverse bear trap, and even the needle pit to a smaller extent do make it into the game, and we even get a few twists on some traps by seeing different versions of them, such as the rack, which originally in the films twisted people until their bodies snapped, but in this version it goes in reverse, which is pretty interesting to see. The atmosphere at least feels foreboding and sets the tone quite well. Overall flaws aside, you're left with at least a passing score in terms of game design and graphics. It's a shame they didn't have a larger setup to work with because I'd have loved to see more intricate traps like what we see in the films, but it's not in the cards, I suppose. What we do get though is entertaining, so I can dig it. It's Saw, albeit a toned down Saw, but it does at least feel like Saw. A lot of the puzzles are fairly simple, but some do require you to use some brain power, such as this matching game closer to the end of the game. Instead of being a direct pick the two items that are the same, it's you have to pick the two items that go together, like a shotgun and the shells, or a tape recorder and a tape. It took me a few minutes to figure out what I was doing here, I'm not gonna lie. Some of them are pretty challenging though, such as the fuse puzzle halfway through the game, and it's extremely difficult because the puzzle is procedurally generated so that no guide can truly help you. The best advice I can give if you're playing this is to work from the outside in. Still, pretty good stuff. I found myself excited for what was to come next. Overall, when it comes to design, they definitely did the best they could with the best they had, and it shows. I'm not mad about it. It's actually a solid experience. As with any game, one of the most important aspects is how well it plays. I'll get Saw's weakest points out of the way first here. The combat is janky and it doesn't work properly most of the time. Thankfully, the game is merciful in that combat doesn't play a huge role in the game, and you've given plenty of ways to attack the problem. Traps can be used against your opponents, or you can avoid them entirely. There's only a handful of necessary combat encounters, and they play out good enough, I suppose. The combat in the game is hardly groundbreaking, but that's okay because we're not here for a fight anyway.
One of us is going down!
Another weak point is that you don't have a map. The game has no map feature of any kind, but then again, that sort of helps out with the atmosphere. Rarely do players in Jigsaw's games have any real direction beyond vague instructions, so feeling your way around is usually the way to go. Also, very fortunately, this game's not an open world game, so you don't have to find yourself getting lost or turned around too much. The levels are designed in a way that usually you can have a concept or a general idea of where you're supposed to be going. Speaking of knowing where you're going, light is actually a mechanic in the game too. Yes, the concept of being able to see where you're going is actually a mechanic in the game, but don't worry though, this isn't going to be like Corpse Party Blood Drive. Maybe one day I'll cover that game. Instead, you have three options how to approach the problem of always being in the dark, each with their advantages and drawbacks. First, you have the standard issue lighter, your trusty tried and true friend, which you have from the start of the game. You get a sphere around you, creating a low amount of light, which goes out if you run too fast. Second, you have a flashlight. It creates a brighter amount of light and a cone in front of you, but it's highly focused beam and it's difficult to see that which you're not pointed directly at. And of course, it does not go out when you run. Lastly, and perhaps the most worst option for lighting I've ever seen in a video game, is the camera. The camera is a flash that lights up the entire area, but only lasts a scant few seconds and creates a disorienting effect on screen. I have no idea why anybody would use this option, as it sucks in virtually every way and makes playing the game an absolute nightmare. The only reason to even have it is because Adam used a similar method of illumination in the first movie, but let's not forget he went and got himself off, so perhaps he's not the best example to follow. Lastly, when it comes to getting around, we should probably talk about the roadblocks put in your path to stop or slow your progress. Locked doors, which can be picked with a small nail, fuse box puzzles blocking electric doors, and sometimes just traps that need to be disarmed. It's all pretty good stuff, and the time sequences never really feel unfair or impossible to solve within the short time limit that you're given, even if you do cut it close a time or two. You're given the whole package, I would say. Quick time events, interesting puzzles, a foreboding environment that feels creepy to navigate, and even physical hazards for trying to progress carelessly. Yes, it's a Saw game, so naturally there are going to be traps. Much of the asylum is littered with traps and intended to slow your progress down or make you look before you leap, so to speak. If you're not careful, you'll find yourself dead on the floor, as in most cases, springing a trap means instant death. However, as I said before, the same is also true for your enemies, who seem to blatantly forget they're in Jigsaw's world and walk right into a trap even if they see you setting up right in front of them. The enemy AI is, well, to call it artificial intelligence would be an oxymoron, let's put it that way.
Go that way, I'll look in here.
While the game has its shortcomings in the gameplay department, I would say overall the whole package is not too shabby. You're left with a game that is still enjoyable, hell I even got the Platinum Trophy in it, so you can tell I definitely had some fun. If you go in with a mindset that is willing to accept 7 out of 10 games for what they are, you won't be disappointed and you'll enjoy your time here. Okay, now is a good time to bring up this topic, the dreaded 7 out of 10 game. Personally, I've always hated number scores for games because I find numbers to be objective and lean more towards letter grading that have a bit more wiggle room, but most people are familiar with number grading, so I tend to refer to those because they're what everybody usually knows. That being said, there's a crowd of people who consider any game that's under an 8 out of 10 or even a 9 out of 10 to be crap and not even worth looking at. And I'm here to say, I just think that many people are just way too harsh. This is just my opinion and feel free to disagree, but I find the idea of any game under an 8 to be garbage to be absolutely absurd. I see a 7 or a 6 sometimes to mean fun for some, meaning they won't be considered good to the majority of players, but there's a good chunk of people who will enjoy them. 4 or 5, I would say it means it's fun for a few, and 3 or 4 would be a tiny handful of people, and 1 and 2 would mean that they're only really playing them for content creation because of how bad they are. Again, this is just my opinion, but I really think people should give those 7 out of 10 games a bit more of a chance. In actuality, to even say a game is a 10 would be implying it's perfect, and no game is perfect except for Chrono Trigger. Jokes aside, I think the number scale should be looked at as more of an indicator of how many people will like a game and not inherently how good a game is itself. But again, that's just my opinion, feel free to disagree. I'm just saying I don't think a 7 is a garbage score, okay? It's really hard to talk about this game without explaining the Saw universe, but I'll try and keep it condensed. And yes, naturally it goes without saying that this will include spoilers for the movies, but I'm assuming you kind of figured that anything in this video would be full of spoilers. Saw the video game takes place in the same universe as the films and even has a few characters from the films within it. In the movies, a serial killer named Jigsaw, who is actually a dying cancer patient named John Kramer, makes people play games, as he calls them, of life and death to see if they truly appreciate their lives. The game takes place between the first and second film and stars Detective Tapp as the player character. Many people might remember him as the ex-cop who gets shot at the end of the first film, and well, it's pointed out that we never actually saw him die, so using the power of Deus Ex Machina, Jigsaw saves his life, only throw him into a test of this game. It's actually a very Jigsaw thing to do, really, and it's pretty standard stuff when you think about how he acts in the films. With the explosive collar from the third movie placed on Tapp's neck, he has to undergo a series of tests that forces him to come face to face with other people who Tapp has affected, including the wife of his former partner, who has fallen into a deep depression and neglected their child, the reporter who sensationalized Jigsaw's story and ruined Tapp's reputation, and even Amanda Young makes an appearance, albeit her model makes her look like she's been taking drugs once again.
I saw him.
Who is he? What did he look like?
That's all you care about? I just nearly died.
The story is fairly straightforward, and while it does feature a few twists, it's somewhat shallow compared to the films. Characters are fairly one-dimensional, and most of the dialogue seems like these people had their first day voice acting. Just take a listen.
I wish you hadn't saved me from that thing. I wish I were dead too. Anything would be better than this.
The story is more or less only there to justify a game, and not in a great way that Doom does it. It's just kind of there. It's not the worst story ever though, it's just very basic, and most characters we don't get much time with, or even to explore them. Even our player character is silent most of the time, we don't really get much more about him than the movies haven't already established. I would have loved to see more exploration of Tapp and why he's become so obsessed with the Jigsaw Killer in the first place, but like Christmas Morning, we don't always get what we want. There is somewhat of a strange backstory where they talk more about the asylum prior to the events of the game, but it's not really relevant. While everyone else's performance is somewhat subpar, I have to hand it to the mad lads over at Zombie Studios for actually getting Tobin Bell to record his own character lines. Most movie tie-in games use a sound alike, so I'm a bit surprised that they managed to get the star of the films to his own lines, and they do not disappoint.
The only way to move forward is to forgive, to shed your rage and accept your suffering.
While they aren't as heavy or as poetic as their movie counterpart, He still does a fantastic performance creating that foreboding atmosphere. It's no wonder they milked the franchise for so many sequels and even had one with Chris Rock and freaking Samuel L. Jackson in it. While most of the story feels somewhat shallow, it has somewhat of a poetic ending where the player must choose to walk away to freedom or to try and chase the truth one more time. If you choose freedom, the game ends right there and then, and we're treated to a cutscene that implies our good pal Tap just couldn't stand the idea of appearing in the sequel.
Boobies. Vaginas. Gorgeous.
If you choose truth, well, I'll leave that one for you to find out, since I'm sure some of you are actually planning on playing this game now after watching this crappy video. After all, I am expecting a check from Konami for all the 2 sales that this game from over 15 years ago makes for my video. I'm gonna need every last dime too, because that PS5 Pro is looking mad expensive. Overall, the story is serviceable, just like your mom. Instantly, I have to give Sound a big fat stinking 0 because it doesn't feature the Hello Zep theme, otherwise known as the Saw theme. You know, the Saw theme, the iconic music by Charlie Clouser, which has been used in every last piece of Saw media known to man. This is the only piece of Saw media that doesn't use it, and I can't for the life of me understand why. They were able to get the license to the movie and even get Tobin Bell himself to appear in the game, but they couldn't get the Saw theme?
Mission failed. We'll get them next time.
Absolutely criminal, and they should feel great shame for such a travesty. It's really super disappointing. You spend the entire game waiting to hear it, and it just never happens. Honestly, that's far worse than any trap the Jigsaw could have made me endure. Hell, as much as I ragged on Final Fantasy XIII, at least it delivered hardcore in the music department. Not having the Saw theme is hardly the only issue though, as the game doesn't really have too much in the way of memorable music either. Sure, it has some tone-fitting ambient sounds, but I was expecting something more akin to the films, or just something memorable at all. Instead, it feels like a lot of stock music, and that's a damn shame. Just like the story though, I would say that the issue is serviceable, albeit weaker than the story. It does really suck when a horror game doesn't handle sound well, because it really does make a huge difference. Look at Amnesia, an absolute masterclass when it comes to sound. It's a game that understands how sound makes a huge difference during gameplay, and now I'm probably going to go play it again after making this video. Saw comes from a movie franchise that also understood sound so well, yet doesn't incorporate that into the game very well. While you occasionally hear spooky noises and creaks of the asylum around you, it's just not enough. You're wanting more, and that's a shame because they really could have spiced all of this up. If not with music from the films, at least put some great original tracks. A lot of games are slacking the music department though, it seems, and it seems though it's not going away anytime soon, sadly. Replay value, replay value, replay value. Oh, a set of words that gets thrown around, but its meaning has changed so drastically over the years. Nowadays, it seems to be regulated to games locking content behind finishing the game a second time or having some contrived mechanic that is solely just to get you to pop a game in a second time. However, back in the day... Oh, wait, we need to change to the old gaming grandpa filter for this. Back in my day, replay value was different. It was better than the newfangled Gen Alpha gamers. Where am I? Okay, jokes aside, replay value definitely has changed its meaning for sure, and I'm not going to say that the new generation doesn't have it as good, as there is an advantage to games being designed so the second playthrough can unlock new things. I mean, I'd be lying if I didn't say I enjoyed playing through Persona 5 a second time, or a third time because they released Persona 5 Royal. However, that isn't always what replay value meant. See, back in the day, most of us just saw replay value as the game was just so fun you'd want to play it again, and come back to it again. Regardless of the unlocks you got for your second playthrough, you kind of looked at those old games like an old fling that you wanted one more rekindling of the romance you two once shared. And of course, said rekindling makes you ignore the obnoxiously large back catalog you have in your house that your wife reminds you that you should be playing new games that you just bought instead of revisiting Chrono Trigger for the 48th time. My point is that saying the words replay value used to have powerful backing, and now it's sort of different. I mean, I sort of get why devs now make it to where you have unlocks and additional content only available in the second playthrough, most of which because games become so long, it isn't feasible to keep popping them back in to start over unless you really just only play a handful of games. But some people, like me, who have played hundreds if not thousands of games in my lifetime, games are always competing for my precious little time. So when a game can make me go back and want to play it again, knowing there is nothing new awaiting me, that's a powerful thing. Now, what does any of this have to do with Saw? Well, sadly, nothing. I know I just went on a long tangent about replay value, but sadly this game doesn't really have much. Once you finish the game, there really isn't many unlocks to get your hands on. Additional content to explore, well, nothing. Hell, even all the achievements that you didn't get your first time around can be cleaned up in about an hour or two. And keep in mind, this is actually possible to get all of them in just a single playthrough, shy of one of the two different endings, but even those you can just load the final checkpoint. One of the extras in the game though, which is actually unlocked from the start, is a trailer for Saw 6. A really strange addition, but this game was released to coincide with the film and used as opportunity to build some hype for it. You do get a few making of videos, but again, those are available from the start of the game, so not exactly endgame rewards. The big question though is, in terms of replay value, would I go back and play this game again just for the fun of it? Probably not. Maybe only to show someone the game. That being said though, that's not the end of the world, nor even a mark of a bad game, just a lot of missed opportunities. It's lacking in this department, you know what, I can forgive it, I just can't forgive Icon. When you thought of Saw at the start of the video, it's likely those thoughts didn't include this game, and maybe they should from now on. It's actually quite a decent movie tie-in, even with all its flaws. There's definitely a few missed opportunities, as I've said, but overall you're left with a fairly nice package. It's a game that I'm sure if you can find for a decent price, you'll have a bit of fun, or if anything, it's a good time killer to pad out your trophy count. You're only really looking at 10 to 15 hours of gameplay, but at least it doesn't overstay its welcome like some games. Oh, you thought I was going to splice in that bit again? No, I already told you we're not doing that again. I will say that as a game made to advertise the upcoming film at the time, it definitely had an effect. I found myself popping in Saw 10 right after finishing this game and even getting excited for the upcoming Saw 11. Maybe one day I'll even get around to playing the sequel if I can find it for cheaper than your mom. Crude humor aside, I'd like to thank Zombie Studios for making the game, my wife for enduring the convoluting recording setup that ate up the living room for 3 days, and of course you guys for watching. Please subscribe if you want to see more videos like this one, leave a like to help boost my channel to others, and of course leave a comment below to tell me what you thought or share your own thoughts on the game. This is WisPlay, and that's enough of that.